All right, so this is lesson 711, part B. We're going to use some of our equation solving techniques we just learned to solve situations that are described in words. So basically what we're going to do is try and come up with an equation, or sometimes you can just understand what kind of a relationship is going on and decide whether to use backtracking or whatever. But the main idea is here that we can come up with an equation, and then we can use one of our equation solving techniques to figure it out. So here's the first problem. Jessica said, I'm thinking of a number. When I subtract 3 from my number, multiply the result by 8, and then divide this result by 3, I get 32. What is my number? Well, some of you probably know that you could just start with a result and work backwards if you know the inverse operations to work backwards. I think it would be easier if we write an equation to represent that, because that's not too hard. So let's just say the number that she's thinking of is n. And then let's just write out what she's saying. She says, when I subtracted 3 from my number, so n minus 3, and then I multiplied that by 8, we'll need parentheses there, and then divide this result by 3, so we're dividing the whole thing by 3, it equals 32. Now, since n is just in one place here, we can just work backwards. Working backwards, we would do 32 times 3, and then divide that by 8, and then add 3 to get our answer. And if we want to be a little more formal about it, we can set up our little diagram here. So we have our n, and we're subtracting 3, and then we are multiplying by 8, and then we are dividing by 3, and after we do that, we end up with 32. So we can see that we would need to multiply by 3, divide by 8, add 3 to get our answer. 32 times 3 is 96, divided by 8 is 12, plus 3 is 15. So I think Jessica's number is 15. So, and we can check that by just substituting 15 in for n, or doing what she says. And so she's thinking of a number 15. When she subtracts 3 from that, that would be 12. When you multiply that by 8, that would be 96, and then divide that by 3, that would be 32, which is what she says we should have. All right, so let's try one more here and see if we can't come up with an equation and then decide what method we're going to use to solve our equation. Neva and Owen collect action figures. Owen has 5 times as many action figures as Neva. And Owen has 60 more than Neva. We'll write and solve an equation to find the number of action figures Neva and Owen have together. So we have actually 2 ways to represent Owen. Owen has 5 times as many, and Owen has 60 more. So let's just write down 2 expressions for Owen, and knowing that Owen has the same amount, these 2 expressions should be equal to each other. So Owen, and let's let the number that Neva has, let's let that be n. So 5 times as many as Neva, 60 more than Neva. And we can write that with just numbers and symbols. 5 times as many as Neva would just be 5 times n. And 60 more than Neva would be n plus 60. And we think those should be equal because the number Owen has should be equal to the number that Owen has. They should be the same. Now here's a situation where we end up with an equation with the same number with the variable on both sides. So we're going to have to do something to both sides to solve this one, and I think that would be subtracting n. 5n minus n is 4n, and that equals 60. And then we can just divide by 4 to get our answer, and so on. So Neva has 15. And then Owen has 5 times as many as Neva, so Owen has 5 times 15, which is 75. And that should also be 60 more than Neva. So if we add 60, we should get the same thing, which is 75. And that's all All right. I'm going to do one more with you, how you set up the equation. I think this one is a little trickier because it's number 18 says we have even numbers. The sum of three consecutive even numbers is 78. Remember, consecutive means one right after another. And sum means add. So we should add three numbers, one right after another, even numbers, and it should equal 78. So let n represent the first of the even numbers. Write expressions for the next two even numbers. So the first of the even numbers, we're going to just say as n, any number. The second one, then, if it's the next in line, so it's like if the first one was 6, the second one would be 8, then 10. Notice that we're adding 2 to get the next 2. So we can just say n plus 2 for the next one. And then the third one would just be 2 more than that, than the second one, which would be n plus 4. And our equation we can represent, we need the sum of these three numbers, so n plus 2 plus n plus 4 has to equal 78. And now we can solve that. N plus n is just 3 times n. And 2 plus 4 is 6 equals 78. Now I'm just going to work backwards. 78 minus 6 is 72 divided by 3 is 24. N plus 2, the next one would be 26. N plus 4 would be 28. And if I add those all up, that would give me 78. So that's the correct answer. All right. I'll do one more with you. It says a distributor has 800 copies of a new DVD. So that's an important piece of information, 800 copies. To distribute among 4 stores. There's 4 stores. She plans to give the first 2 stores the same number of copies. So that's a helpful hint. The third store will receive 3 times as many as either of the first 2. And the fourth store will receive 20 more than either of the first 2. How many will each store receive? So let's just break this up here. We have 4 stores in the story here. And we know the first 2 have the same amount both. So let's just say n for each of those. You could use x, any letter you want. Now it says that the third store will receive 3 times as many DVDs as either of the first 2. So 3 times n. And the fourth store will receive 20 more than either of the first. So that would be 20 more would be n plus 20. And the distributor is going to has 800 copies. So in other words, if we add up all 4 of these stores, we should get 800. Well, that simplifies to, in fact, I think I'll just leave it there. That you can simplify that. Notice we have n in more than one place, so we can't backtrack. So you're going to have to simplify it first. Go ahead and try that, simplify it, and then use whatever method you like from that point to see if you can't get the right answer. All right? I think that's where we'll quit here, and we'll do the rest in class. See you tomorrow.